The podium stretched before me like a canyon I had to cross, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my notes. 300 faces stared back at me from the Portland Convention Center audience, waiting for me to speak about sustainable architecture, my life's work, my passion. But in that moment, all I could hear was the thundering of my own heartbeat drowning out everything else. That was 6 months ago. Today, I'm standing here again, same venue, same topic, but everything has changed. My voice is steady, my presence commanding, and I can feel the energy of the universe flowing through every word I speak. The transformation wasn't magic, though it felt magical. It was the result of discovering something that shifted my entire reality about what I was capable of. Let me take you back to where this journey really began, because the moment that changed everything wasn't on that stage at all. It was in my tiny studio apartment in Southeast Portland, crying into a bowl of cereal at 2 a.m. I'm Sarah, I'm 34, and I'm an architect specializing in sustainable design. I've always been passionate about creating buildings that work in harmony with the environment. But there was one massive problem. I couldn't talk about my work without my voice shaking, my palms sweating, and my mind going completely blank. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could design a 20-story building that would stand for decades, calculate load-bearing walls and energy efficiency down to the decimal, but ask me to present my ideas to more than 2 people, and I'd fall apart. Public speaking was my kryptonite, and in the architecture world, if you can't present your vision, your career hits a ceiling fast. That night in February, I'd just bombed another presentation. This time it was for a potential client, a sustainable housing development that could have launched my independent practice. I'd prepared for weeks, knew every detail of my proposal by heart, but the moment I stood up in front of their board, my throat closed up. I stumbled through half my presentation before they politely thanked me and moved on to the next architect. I was scrolling mindlessly through TikTok, trying to numb the sting of rejection, when a video stopped me cold. It was a woman about my age, speaking directly into the camera with this incredible presence. She wasn't perfect. Her hair was a little messy. She was sitting in what looked like her car, but something about her energy was magnetic. "Your thoughts create your reality," she said, looking directly at me through the screen. "Every time you tell yourself you can't do something, you're literally programming your subconscious to make that true." But here's what blew my mind. The universe is listening to every single thought you think, every feeling you feel. What if instead of focusing on what scares you, you started focusing on who you're becoming? I watched that 30-second video probably 20 times that night. Something about her words hit differently than all the public speaking advice I'd consumed over the years. She wasn't talking about techniques or breathing exercises. She was talking about completely shifting how I saw myself. But here's what happened next that I could never have imagined. I started researching everything I could about this law of attraction concept. I'd heard of it before, dismissed it as wishful thinking, but something about my desperation made me open to possibilities I'd previously written off. I discovered Dr. Joe Dispenza's work on rewiring the brain, how our repeated thoughts literally create neural pathways that become our automatic responses. I learned about vibrational alignment from Abraham Hicks' teachings, the idea that we attract experiences that match our predominant emotional state. Most powerfully, I stumbled across Neville Goddard's concept of living from the end, imagining yourself as already being the person you want to become. That's when I decided to conduct my own experiment. What if I stopped seeing myself as Sarah who can't speak publicly and started manifesting as Sarah who commands the room? The first step was getting brutally honest about the story I'd been telling myself. Every morning for years, I'd wake up, and within minutes, I'd remember some speaking situation on my calendar and feel that familiar knot in my stomach. I was literally starting each day by attracting more anxiety into my life. I started with something simple that Neville Goddard called the state akin to sleep. Every night as I was falling asleep, instead of replaying my speaking failures, I would visualize myself giving presentations with confidence. I'd imagine the feeling of my voice being strong and clear, the satisfaction of seeing audience members nodding along, the applause at the end. But visualization alone wasn't enough. I needed to shift my daily vibration. 3 weeks into this practice, I had a small breakthrough. My firm's weekly team meeting was coming up, and typically I'd spend the weekend dreading my project update. Instead, I tried something different. I started practicing gratitude for the opportunity to share my work, rather than focusing on my fear of judgment. I remember walking into that conference room feeling different. Not confident exactly, but not terrified either. When my turn came to present, something shifted. My voice was steadier than usual. I made eye contact. I even added a spontaneous comment about sustainability trends that made my boss nod approvingly. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. For the first time, I had evidence that the universe might actually be responding to my new internal narrative. But the real test was coming fast. Our firm had been invited to pitch for a major eco-friendly office complex downtown. It would be the biggest presentation of my career, in front of a panel of 15 decision-makers. The old Sarah would have found a way to avoid it. The new Sarah I was becoming knew this was exactly the opportunity I'd been manifesting. Here's where things got really interesting, and where I learned that manifestation isn't just about positive thinking. 2 weeks before the presentation, I had what felt like a complete setback. I was practicing my pitch at home when my neighbor knocked on the door to complain about the noise. The interruption completely threw me off, and suddenly all my old fears came flooding back. I spent that entire evening convinced I was fooling myself, that I'd never really change. But then I remembered something from Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, that transformation isn't linear. The old neural pathways don't just disappear, they fight back. What matters is how quickly you can return to your new way of being. So instead of spiraling into self-doubt, I did something that would have been impossible for me 6 months earlier. I acknowledged the fear, thanked it for trying to protect me, and then consciously chose to raise my vibration back to confidence. I put on music and danced in my living room. Yes, literally danced, until I could feel that energy of certainty flowing through me again. Then I sat down and wrote out affirmations that felt true. I am a conscious creator of my speaking experience. My expertise serves others, my voice matters. The night before the big presentation, I did something that still gives me chills thinking about it. Instead of cramming or panicking, I took a long bath and did what I now call my future self meditation. I closed my eyes and imagined myself 1 year in the future, someone who speaks confidently all the time. I asked this future version of myself what advice she had for tomorrow. The answer came so clearly it felt like synchronicity. Trust that your passion for your work will carry your voice. Stop trying to be perfect and start being of service. The morning of the presentation, I woke up with this strange calm. Not the absence of nerves, but the presence of something stronger, a knowing that I was exactly where I needed to be. I arrived at the office building early and found a quiet corner to do my visualization one more time. I saw myself walking into that room not as someone who had to prove herself, but as someone bringing a gift. My expertise in sustainable design that could make their building better. When I walked into that conference room, I felt the power of intention in every step. The panel was intimidating. Serious faces, expensive suits, notepads ready to critique every word. But instead of shrinking, I expanded. I thought about all the buildings I could help them make more sustainable, all the energy they could save, all the environmental impact we could reduce together. My presentation wasn't perfect. I stumbled over one section and had to backtrack, but something magical happened. Instead of that stumble destroying my confidence, I simply smiled, made a small joke about architects and their relationship with technology, and continued. The room actually relaxed, and I could feel them connecting with me as a human being, not just a presenter. When I finished, there was a moment of silence that used to terrify me. But this time, I could sense it was the good kind of silence, the kind where people are processing what they've just heard. That was exactly the kind of innovative thinking we're looking for, the lead developer said. When can you start? I got the contract. But more than that, I got something I'd been unconsciously attracting my whole career: respect for my expertise and recognition of my value. That was 4 months ago. Since then, I've given presentations to city planning committees, spoken at 3 sustainability conferences, and next month I'm delivering a keynote at the Green Building Expo here in Portland. But here's what really changed. I stopped seeing public speaking as something I had to survive and started seeing it as something I get to experience. Every presentation became an opportunity to manifest deeper connection with my audience, to share knowledge that could make a real difference in the world. The universal laws I learned about aren't magic. They're about understanding that our internal state creates our external reality. When I shifted from vibrating at the frequency of fear to the frequency of service, everything shifted. I still get nervous before big presentations. The difference is that now I know nervousness is just energy, and energy can be channeled. I use that pre-speaking adrenaline to fuel my passion instead of feeding my fear. Last month, I was back at the Portland Convention Center, same venue where this story started. This time, I was the keynote speaker for an architecture conference, talking about the intersection of sustainable design and conscious creation. As I looked out at those 300 faces, I felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that brought me there, for the spiritual awakening that happened when I stopped fighting who I was and started becoming who I was meant to be. The most beautiful part? After my talk, a young architect came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I've been struggling with speaking anxiety for years," she said. "Listening to you tonight, I realized I've been attracting more of what I don't want by focusing on my fear. Thank you for showing me there's another way." That's when I truly understood the ripple effect of raising your vibration. When you transform yourself, you give others permission to transform too. I'm not sharing this story to convince you that the law of attraction will magically eliminate all your challenges. I'm sharing it because I want you to know that the limitations you think are permanent might just be patterns you've practiced for so long, they feel like truth. Your dreams are not too big. Your voice matters. The world needs what you have to offer. But first, you have to believe that yourself. If you've been stuck in patterns that no longer serve you, if you've been telling yourself stories about what you can't do, I want you to know that change is possible. Not overnight, not without effort, but absolutely possible. The universe is always listening, always responding to the frequency you're broadcasting. What frequency are you choosing today? If this story resonated with you, if you're ready to start creating your dream life instead of accepting limitations that feel permanent, I want to hear from you. Comment below. My voice matters if you're ready to step into the confident version of yourself that's been waiting to emerge. And if this story inspired you to believe in your own transformation, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to remember their own power. Subscribe for more real stories about ordinary people creating extraordinary changes in their lives through the power of intention and conscious choice. Remember, you're not stuck with the version of yourself you've been. You're always just one decision away from becoming who you're meant to be.